The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage, the metallic echo bouncing off the walls like a gunshot in the night. It was past midnight, and I was elbow deep in the engine of my '98 Ford pickup, trying to fix a carburetor that had more miles on it than a long-haul trucker. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old wood settling. That's when I heard her voice drifting through the thin walls. "If you don't like me clubbing till 4 a.m, you're just insecure," Beth's voice carried from the kitchen, sharp and defensive. "I'm a grown woman, and I can do whatever I want." I froze, my hand still gripping the socket wrench. Insecure? I wiped my hands on an old rag and moved closer to the door connecting the garage to the house. The conversation was getting heated. "No, I don't care what Jimmy thinks anymore," she continued, and I could hear the venom in her voice. "He's boring. All he does is work and fix things. When's the last time he took me dancing? When's the last time he made me feel alive? My name is James Parrish, but everyone calls me Jimmy. I'm 43 years old, and I've been married to Beth for 16 years. We have 2 daughters, Beau and Bree, 15 and 13 respectively. I run the commercial side of Parrish Electrical, the family business my father started 40 years ago. It's honest work, blue-collar work, and it's kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. But apparently, that wasn't enough for Beth anymore. "You know what John said to me yesterday?" she continued. John, my older brother. The golden boy who ran the residential side of our business and had always been better at charming people than I was. He said I deserve better. He said I'm too beautiful to waste away with someone who doesn't appreciate me. I pressed my ear against the door, my heart hammering in my chest like a jackhammer on concrete. I know, Beth said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's complicated because he's Jimmy's brother. But you should see the way he looks at me, Angela, like I'm the only woman in the world." Angela. Beth's best friend since high school, the socialite wife of a successful lawyer, always perfectly dressed, always stirring up drama in our small Midwestern town of Millbrook. Population 12,000 on a good day, where everyone knows everyone else's business before they know it themselves. "We went to that new place downtown last weekend," Beth continued, "the one with the live music. John bought me drinks all night and we danced until they closed. God, Angela, I felt like I was 25 again. When's the last time Jimmy made me feel like that? Never, apparently. Because I was too busy working 60-hour weeks to keep our family business afloat and maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she said, and I could hear her moving around the kitchen, probably pacing like she always did when she was agitated. "The girls already think Jimmy's a loser. Beau told me yesterday that John's more fun than her own father. Can you believe that? Actually, I could believe it. Beau had been giving me the cold shoulder for weeks, rolling her eyes whenever I tried to talk to her, spending more time at her uncle's flashy downtown condo than at home. I'd chalked it up to typical teenage rebellion, but now I was seeing the bigger picture. "Maybe you're right," Beth said after a pause. "Maybe it is time to make a change. Life's too short to settle for boring, right?" The conversation ended, and I heard her footsteps heading upstairs. I stood in the garage for a long time, staring at my broken-down truck and feeling like my life was falling apart in much the same way, piece by piece, bolt by bolt, until nothing was left but scattered parts and broken dreams. The next morning, I sat at our kitchen table, drinking coffee from a mug that read, "World's Greatest Dad," a Father's Day gift from happier times. Beth came downstairs wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than most people made in a week, her blonde hair perfectly styled even though it was barely 7 in the morning. "You're up early?" she said without looking at me, heading straight for the coffee maker. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, watching her carefully. "Heard you on the phone late last night. Everything okay?" She tensed slightly, her shoulders stiffening. "Just girl talk, nothing that would interest you." "Try me." She turned around, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance at being caught. Angela's having problems with her marriage. I was just being a good friend. The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly that I almost admired the technique. Almost. "That's nice of you," I said, taking another sip of coffee. "You've been spending a lot of time being a good friend lately. All those late nights out." What's that supposed to mean? Her voice had an edge to it now, the same sharp tone I'd heard on the phone. Nothing. Just making an observation. Bew chose that moment to stomp into the kitchen, wearing ripped jeans and a crop top that showed off her belly button ring. Another thing I'd apparently had no say in. She grabbed a granola bar from the pantry and shot me a look that could have frozen hell over. "Mom, can I stay at Uncle John's this weekend?" she asked, completely ignoring my presence. "He said he'd teach me how to drive his Camaro." "That sounds fun, honey," Beth replied, shooting me a defiant look. "Your uncle knows how to have a good time, unlike some people." The barb hit its mark, but I kept my expression neutral. "She's only 15, Beth. Don't you think she should wait until she has her permit?" "God, Dad, you're so paranoid," Bew snapped. "Uncle John says you're just jealous because his car is cooler than your stupid truck. Uncle John says a lot of things, apparently. At least he's not boring," she shot back, grabbing her backpack. "Mom, I'm going to school. Can Uncle John pick me up today? I don't want to ride in the Loser Mobile." The Loser Mobile. My truck, the same truck that had reliably transported our family for the past 5 years, had somehow become a source of embarrassment. I watched my daughter walk out the door, her words stinging more than I cared to admit. "You don't have to be so hard on her," Beth said, but there was no real conviction in her voice. "I'm not being hard on her. I'm being a parent. Someone has to. What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up, rinsing my coffee mug in the sink. "It means that maybe, if we presented a united front, instead of letting her play us against each other, she might show a little more respect. Or maybe if you tried to connect with your daughters instead of hiding in the garage all the time, they might actually want to spend time with you." The accusation hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. I turned to face her, really looking at my wife for the first time in months. When had she become this stranger? When had the woman I'd married, the woman who used to laugh at my jokes and steal my t-shirts to sleep in, become this cold, calculating person who spoke to me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe? "I'm trying to provide for this family, Beth. Someone has to pay for the house, the cars, the private school tuition, the designer clothes, the boring, predictable life that's slowly killing me," she interrupted. "Yes, Jimmy, you're very good at providing. But when's the last time you provided anything that actually mattered? When's the last time you made me laugh? When's the last time you looked at me like you actually wanted me?" I stared at her, speechless, because the truth was, I couldn't remember. Somewhere along the way, between building the business and raising kids and paying bills, we'd stopped being lovers and become roommates, business partners in the enterprise of family life. But that didn't give her the right to turn to my brother. "I have to go to work," I said finally. "Of course you do." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, but her voice stopped me. "Jimmy?" I turned back, hoping for something, an apology maybe. A sign that the woman I'd married was still in there somewhere. "Don't forget that Bree has a soccer game tonight. Try to make it this time." And just like that, the moment was gone. The parish electrical office sat in a converted warehouse on the east side of town, surrounded by auto repair shops and a diner that served coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I'd been coming here since I was 12 years old, sweeping floors and organizing inventory for my father. Now, at 43, I practically lived here. My office was a testament to controlled chaos. Blueprints rolled up in corners, invoices stacked on every available surface, and a coffee maker that had seen better decades. But it was mine, and it was honest work. We employed 15 people, mostly local guys who'd been with us for years. Good, reliable men who showed up on time and didn't sleep with their brothers' wives. I was reviewing a bid for rewiring the old Millbrook High School when my sister Connie knocked on my doorframe. She was 2 years younger than me, with the same dark hair and stubborn jaw that ran in the Parrish family. She managed our books and had an uncanny ability to spot trouble from a mile away. "You look like hell," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Good morning to you, too." "I'm serious, Jimmy." "When's the last time you slept? And don't tell me you were up working on that truck again. I can smell the coffee and desperation from here." Connie had always been direct. It was one of her better qualities, even when it was inconvenient. "Just having some problems at home?" I admitted. "Beth?" I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. "Want to talk about it?" Before I could answer, John's voice boomed through the office. "Morning, everyone. Beautiful day, isn't it?" My brother had always been larger than life, 6'2", perfectly styled hair, and a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. He wore expensive suits and drove a cherry-red Camaro that he'd bought during his midlife crisis 3 years ago. At 45, he was still playing the role of the cool older brother, and apparently it was working on my wife. "Jimmy, buddy," he said, strolling into my office like he owned the place. "How's the family?" Beth looked fantastic at the school fundraiser last week. "You're a lucky man." The casual way he said her name made my skin crawl. Like he'd been thinking about her, like he'd been talking to her. "She's fine," I replied curtly. "And the girls?" Bew's growing up so fast. "She's going to be a heartbreaker, just like her mother." Connie shot me a look that said she was picking up on the same weird vibe I was. John had always been friendly, but this felt different, more personal, more proprietary. "They're fine too." "Good, good. Hey, I was thinking we should all get together this weekend. Maybe a barbecue at my place? I just got this new sound system installed, and the condo's perfect for entertaining." "We'll see." "Come on, don't be such a hermit. Beth mentioned she loves to dance, and I've got a great playlist. We could make it a real party." There it was. Beth mentioned. How many conversations were they having? And about what? I said we'll see. John's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. Sure. No pressure. Just want to spend time with my favorite brother and his beautiful family." After he left, Connie leaned forward. "What the hell was that about?" I wish I knew, but I was starting to get a pretty good idea. That afternoon I made a decision that would change everything. I drove home early, telling myself I was just going to surprise Beth, maybe take her out to lunch and try to reconnect. But deep down, I knew I was looking for evidence of what I already suspected. The house was empty. Beth's car was gone, and there was a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone shopping with Angela. Back later." B. I stood in our kitchen, looking around at the life we'd built together. Family photos on the refrigerator, Bree's soccer schedule held up with magnets, a grocery list in Beth's handwriting. Normal domestic things that suddenly felt like props in a play I didn't know I was performing in. Her laptop was on the kitchen table, closed but plugged in. Beth had always been casual about technology, using the same password for everything. Princess 1979, her childhood nickname and birth year. I'd set up all her accounts years ago, back when we trusted each other with everything. I opened the laptop, my hands shaking slightly. This felt like a violation, but then again, so did everything that had been happening in my marriage lately. Her email was already open. Nothing suspicious in the inbox, just the usual shopping newsletters and social media notifications. But her browser history told a different story. Dating websites, lots of them, Match.com, eHarmony, even Tinder. My stomach dropped as I clicked on her profile. Beth, 40, recently single and ready to have fun again? Recently single. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but it got worse, much worse. The profile photos were our engagement pictures from 17 years ago, but I'd been cropped out. Carefully, deliberately removed from what had been one of the happiest days of our lives. In the photos, she was laughing and looking off to the side. At me, though you couldn't tell that now. To anyone viewing the profile, she just looked happy and carefree and available. I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounding. Dozens of men had contacted her, and she'd responded to several. Flirty, suggestive conversations that made me feel sick. But the worst part was a message thread with someone named JohnnyBoy92. It was my brother, my own brother, using a fake profile to message my wife on a dating app. "Can't stop thinking about last night," one message read. "You looked incredible in that blue dress." "Thank you for making me feel beautiful again," she'd replied. "I forgot what it was like to be desired." "Your husband is an idiot if he doesn't see what he has. He's too busy with work to notice anything. Sometimes I feel like I'm invisible. You could never be invisible to me." The conversation went on, each message more intimate than the last. They'd been meeting secretly for weeks, maybe months. Dinners, drinks, dancing. All the things she'd accused me of not doing, she'd been doing with John. I sat back in the kitchen chair, staring at the screen. 17 years of marriage, 2 children, a life built together, and this was how it ended. Not with a conversation or even a fight, but with secret messages and cropped photos and lies told so smoothly they might as well have been truth. My phone buzzed, a text from Beth. "Having lunch with Angela. Might be late. Don't wait up." But I knew better now. I knew exactly where she was and who she was with. I closed the laptop and walked out to the garage, where my tools were waiting and my truck still needed fixing. At least some things in my life were still salvageable. But as I picked up my wrench and got back to work, I was already planning my next move. Because if Beth and John thought they could humiliate me in my own town, in front of my own daughters, they were about to learn something about the boring, predictable Jimmy Parrish. I might be a lot of things, but I wasn't stupid. And I sure as hell wasn't going down without a fight. 3 days later, I found myself sitting in my truck outside the Sunset Motel on Route 9, watching my wife's silver Lexus parked next to my brother's red Camaro. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same motel where Beth and I had spent our wedding night 18 years ago, back when we were young and broke and thought love could conquer anything. The sunset hadn't aged well. The neon sign flickered intermittently, and the parking lot was cracked asphalt held together by weeds and wishful thinking. It was the kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be seen, which made it perfect for what my wife and brother were doing. I'd been tracking Beth's phone for the past 2 days, a skill I'd picked up when the girls were younger and we worried about them getting lost. The same parental controls I'd installed to keep my daughters safe were now showing me exactly how my marriage was falling apart. They'd been in room 237 for an hour and 15 minutes. I got out of my truck and walked across the parking lot, my work boots crunching on broken glass and cigarette butts. The desk clerk was a kid who couldn't have been more than 19, with greasy hair and a name tag that read, Tyler. "Help you?" he asked without looking up from his phone. "Yeah, I'm looking for my wife and brother. They're in room 237. Honeymoon suite, right?" That got his attention. He looked up, taking in my work clothes and the expression on my face. I can't really give out information about guests, sir." I leaned against the counter, pulling out my wallet. "Look, Tyler, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to make sure they're comfortable. Maybe you could tell me how long they've been renting the room. I really can't." I placed a $50 bill on the counter. "I'm not asking you to break any laws. I'm just a concerned family member." Tyler glanced around the empty lobby, then palmed the money. "They've had the room for 3 weeks. Every Tuesday and Friday afternoon, 2 to 6. 3 weeks. Every Tuesday and Friday. While I was at work, busting my ass to pay for the house and the cars and the lifestyle that apparently wasn't good enough for my wife." "Thanks, Tyler. You've been very helpful." I walked back to my truck, but instead of leaving, I pulled out my pocket knife and walked over to John's Camaro. The car was his pride and joy, a 1969 SS that he'd restored himself and babied like it was made of spun gold. I knelt down next to the rear tire and pressed the knife against the sidewall. The rubber gave way with a satisfying hiss, and I moved to the next tire, and the next. By the time I was finished, John's car was sitting on 4 flats. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket and wrote a quick note. Hope you're better at this than you were at football. Your loving brother. I tucked the note under his windshield wiper and drove away, feeling better than I had in weeks. That evening, John called the house furious. Someone slashed my tires, he yelled, loud enough that I could hear him from across the kitchen. Beth had answered the phone and her face had gone pale. That's terrible, she said, but her eyes were on me. Do you have any idea who would do something like that? Some sick bastard left a note about football. You know how many people I beat in high school? Could be anyone. I almost laughed. John had been mediocre at best in high school football, riding the bench most of his senior year. But he'd rewritten that history over the years, the way he rewrote everything else to make himself look better. I'm sure it was just random vandalism, Beth said, still watching me. These things happen. Random? 4 tires don't go flat randomly, Beth. Someone did this on purpose. Well, I hope you figure it out. She hung up and turned to face me. Do you know anything about this? About what? Don't play games with me, Jimmy. John's tires. I took a sip of my beer and shrugged. Maybe he parked in the wrong place. You know how it is in this town. People don't like outsiders. He's not an outsider. He's your brother. Is he? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning. Beth's face flushed, and for a moment I thought she might confess everything. But instead, she turned and walked upstairs without another word. The next Friday, I decided to make my presence known more directly. I knew they'd be at the motel. Tyler had been very specific about their schedule, but this time I wanted to see the look on their faces when they realized they'd been caught. I parked across the street and waited. Sure enough, at exactly 2:15, Beth's Lexus pulled into the lot, followed by John's Camaro riding on 4 new tires. They got out of their cars separately, trying to look casual, but I could see the excitement in their body language. The quick glances, the way they moved toward the room like magnets drawn to each other. I waited until they'd been inside for 30 minutes. Then I walked across the street and knocked on the door of room 237. Room service, I called out in a fake accent. We didn't order room service. Beth's voice came through the door, muffled and panicked. Complimentary champagne from the management. I heard whispering, then footsteps. The door opened a crack, and John's face appeared, flushed and suspicious. We didn't order. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. Jimmy. Hello, brother. Behind him, I could see Beth scrambling to put on a robe, her hair disheveled, her face a mask of guilt and terror. What are you doing here? John asked, trying to block my view of the room. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by and see how you two were doing. You know, family bonding and all that. This isn't what it looks like, Beth said, appearing behind John. The robe she was wearing was hotel-issued, which meant her clothes were somewhere else in the room, probably scattered on the floor next to John's. Really? Because it looks like my wife and my brother are having an affair in the same motel where we spent our wedding night. But hey, maybe I'm just seeing things. John stepped forward, his chest puffed out like a rooster. Look, Jimmy, I know this is complicated. Complicated? I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Is that what we're calling it? I was thinking more along the lines of pathetic, or maybe just sad. You don't understand, Beth said, clutching the robe tighter. We never meant for this to happen. Oh, I understand perfectly. You're bored with your boring husband and his boring life, so you decided to spice things up with his brother. Very original, Beth. I'm sure no one's ever thought of that before. Don't talk to her like that, John said, stepping protectively in front of Beth. Don't talk to my wife like what? Like she's a cheating whore? Because that's exactly what she is. John's face darkened. You better watch your mouth. Or what? You'll steal something else from me? Maybe my truck next time? Or hell, why not just take my whole life? Oh, wait, you're already doing that. We stood there for a moment, three people whose lives were about to change forever, staring at each other across the threshold of a cheap motel room. Then I smiled, and it must have been a terrible smile, because both of them took a step back. Don't worry, I said. I'm not going to make a scene. That would be undignified, and we parish men are nothing if not dignified. Right, John? I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the doorway. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because if they wanted to play games, I was about to show them what a real player looked like. The boxing gym was my sanctuary, the one place in Millbrook where I could hit something without getting arrested. Mick's gym sat in the basement of an old department store, all exposed brick and hanging heavy bags, smelling like sweat and determination. I'd been coming here for 5 years, ever since my doctor told me I needed to find a healthy outlet for stress. Turned out, I was going to need it more than I thought. Mick Torino was 68 years old, built like a fire hydrant, and had been training fighters since before I was born. He'd taken one look at my soft office worker hands and decided to turn me into something harder. It had taken time, but now I could hold my own in the ring, and more importantly, I'd learned how to think like a fighter. You're hitting angry today, Mick observed, watching me work the heavy bag. Angry's good for power, bad for precision. What's eating you, Jimmy? I threw a combination, jab, cross, hook, and felt the satisfying thud of leather against my gloves. Family problems. The wife? Among others. Mick had been married 4 times, so he considered himself an expert on the subject. Let me guess. She's screwing around. I paused mid-punch. How'd you know? Because you got that look. Same look I had when I caught my 3rd wife with my accountant. Rage mixed with humiliation, with a little bit of, what do I do now, thrown in for seasoning. So what did you do? Mick grinned, showing teeth that had seen better decades. I ruined them both. Legally, of course. See, the thing about cheaters is they get sloppy. They think they're smarter than everyone else, but they always leave a trail. You just gotta be smart enough to follow it. I'm listening. First rule, document everything. Every lie, every suspicious behavior, every dollar they spend on their little love affair. Second rule, don't let them know you know. Let them get comfortable. Let them make mistakes. Third rule, when you're ready to strike, hit hard and hit everything at once. Don't give them time to recover. I thought about Beth and John, probably planning their next rendezvous right now, thinking they were so clever, thinking I was too stupid or too trusting to figure it out. What if it's not just the wife? I asked. What if it's family? Mick's expression darkened. Family betrayal? That's the worst kind. But it's also the most satisfying to pay back, because they never see it coming. Family thinks they know you, thinks they can predict what you'll do. That's their weakness. I unwrapped my hands, my mind racing. Thanks, Mick. I think I know what I need to do. Just remember, kid, revenge is a dish best served cold. But when you do serve it, make sure it's a feast. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a different person. Not on the surface, I still went to work, still came home for dinner, still helped Bree with her homework. But underneath, I was documenting, planning, preparing for war. I installed a keylogger on Beth's laptop, capturing every password, every message, every secret she thought she was keeping. I started carrying a small digital recorder, documenting her lies about where she was going and what she was doing. I opened a separate bank account and began moving money, small amounts at first, then larger sums as I prepared for the financial battle ahead. Most importantly, I started spreading seeds. It began with Mrs. Garland, our next-door neighbor, a 70-year-old gossip who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. I made a point of running into her while she was getting her mail. Afternoon, Mrs. Garland. Beautiful day, isn't it? Oh, hello, Jimmy. Yes, lovely weather. How's the family? Can't complain. Though I have to say I'm a little worried about Beth. She's been going out so much lately, staying out so late. I hope she's not getting into any trouble. Mrs. Garland's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Oh? What kind of trouble? I'm probably just being paranoid. It's just that she's been spending a lot of time with John, and you know how he is with women. Always was a charmer, even when we were kids. Your brother John? The one with the fancy car? That's the one. I'm sure it's innocent. Family bonding, you know, but people talk, and I'd hate for Beth's reputation to suffer because of idle gossip. I left Mrs. Garland standing by her mailbox, practically vibrating with excitement. By evening, half the neighborhood would know that Jimmy Parrish was worried about his wife spending time with his brother. Next, I visited my old friend Danny Morrison at Morrison's Auto Repair. Danny had been in my graduating class, and his shop was the unofficial information hub for half the men in town. Jimmy, good to see you, buddy. How's business? Can't complain. Hey, Danny, I wanted to ask you about something. You know my brother John, right? Sure, the guy with the Camaro. Brings it in for tune-ups sometimes. Nice car. Yeah, well, he's been having some tire troubles lately. Someone keeps slashing them. I was wondering if you'd heard anything about who might have a grudge against him. Danny's expression grew serious. Tire slashing? That's personal, Jimmy. Usually means someone's real mad about something. Your brother been stepping on any toes lately? I honestly don't know. But between you and me, I'm starting to wonder if maybe he's been stepping on more than toes, if you know what I mean. I let that hang in the air for a moment, watching Danny's face as he processed the implication. You think he's messing around with someone's wife? I didn't say that. But John's always been popular with the ladies, and not all of them are single. I just hope he's being careful, you know? This town doesn't take kindly to that sort of thing. By the time I left Danny's shop, I knew the story would spread through the network of mechanics, contractors, and blue-collar workers who made up half of Millbrook's population. By tomorrow, everyone would be wondering which married woman John Parrish was fooling around with. The beauty of it was that I hadn't lied about anything. I really was worried about Beth's reputation. I really did hope John was being careful. I was just sharing my concerns with friends and neighbors who cared about our family's well-being. The first sign that my strategy was working came 3 days later, when Beth stormed into the house after her weekly hair appointment. "People are talking about us," she announced, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter with more force than necessary. "What kind of talk?" I asked, looking up from the newspaper. "Gossip. Rumors. Apparently, half the town thinks I'm having an affair." "That's ridiculous. Who would say something like that?" "I don't know, but Margie at the salon was full of questions about why I've been seen around town with John so much. She said people are starting to wonder if there's something going on between us." I put down the newspaper and gave her my full attention. "That's terrible, honey. What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, that John's my brother-in-law and we're friends. But she just gave me this look, like she didn't believe me. Well, you know how people in small towns can be. They don't have enough excitement in their own lives, so they make up stories about other people's. It's not funny, Jimmy. This could ruin my reputation. Then maybe you should be more careful about appearances. You know how people talk." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was starting to realize that her secret wasn't as secret as she thought. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that if you're going to spend time with John, maybe you should do it in more public places. Or better yet, include me. Family activities, you know. That way, no one can say anything inappropriate is happening." "We haven't done anything inappropriate." The protest came too quickly, too forcefully. We both knew it. "Of course not," I said calmly. "But perception is reality in a town like this. Maybe it would be better if you two cooled it for a while, just until the gossip dies down." She stormed upstairs without another word, but I could hear her on the phone within minutes, probably calling John to warn him that their cover was blown. That night, as I lay in bed listening to Beth toss and turn beside me, I smiled in the darkness. The war had begun, and I'd just won the first battle. But this was only the beginning. Before I was finished, everyone in Millbrook would know exactly what kind of people my wife and brother really were. And they were going to pay for every lie, every betrayal, every moment of humiliation they'd put me through. The boring, predictable Jimmy Parrish was about to become their worst nightmare. The annual Millbrook Founders Day Festival was the biggest event of the year, drawing crowds from 3 counties to our little downtown square. Local businesses set up booths, the high school marching band performed, and the mayor gave a speech that nobody listened to. It was the kind of wholesome, small-town event that made people feel good about where they lived. It was also the perfect place for a public execution. I'd been planning this moment for 3 weeks, ever since I'd discovered the full extent of Beth and John's betrayal. The evidence I'd gathered was damning. Bank records showing John had been paying for hotel rooms and expensive dinners, credit card statements revealing Beth had bought lingerie she'd never worn at home, and most damaging of all, a series of messages between Beth and her friend Angela that revealed the true architect of my destruction. "I can't believe how well this is working," Beth had written. "Jimmy has no idea what's happening right under his nose." "I told you he was too trusting," Angela had replied. "Men like him never see it coming until it's too late." John says we should be more careful, but honestly, I don't think Jimmy's smart enough to figure it out. He's so focused on work, he barely notices I exist. Perfect. By the time you're ready to file for divorce, you'll have everything documented to prove he was an absent husband. John's testimony will seal the deal. "I still can't believe you came up with this plan." "You're devious, Angela." "I prefer strategic. Jimmy humiliated me when he fired me from the company, and now he's going to pay for it. Taking his wife and his brother was just the beginning." That's when I understood the real scope of the conspiracy. Angela Morrison, Danny's ex-wife, who I'd fired 3 years ago for embezzling from Parish Electrical, had orchestrated the entire affair as revenge against me. She'd manipulated Beth's midlife restlessness and John's jealousy into a weapon designed to destroy my marriage, my family, and my reputation. But 2 could play the manipulation game. The festival was in full swing when I arrived at the town square, carrying a small duffel bag and wearing my best smile. I'd volunteered to help with the sound system, which gave me access to the main stage microphone. The mayor had just finished his speech, and the crowd was milling around the various booths, enjoying the sunshine and small-town atmosphere. I spotted Beth near the face-painting booth with Bree, looking beautiful in a sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payment. John was across the square at the beer tent, surrounded by his usual crowd of admirers, telling stories that got more impressive with each retelling. Angela stood near the gazebo, perfectly dressed as always, surveying the scene like a general reviewing her troops. They had no idea what was coming. I walked up to the stage and tapped the microphone, sending feedback screeching across the square. The crowd turned their attention to me, shading their eyes against the afternoon sun. "Sorry about that, folks," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the speakers. "I hope everyone's having a great time at our Founders Day celebration. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces here today." A few people clapped politely, probably wondering why the electrician was making a speech. "You know, Millbrook is a special place," I continued. "It's the kind of town where everyone knows everyone, where neighbors look out for each other, where families stick together through thick and thin. At least, that's what I always believed." I could see Beth frowning now, probably wondering where this was going. John had stopped talking and was staring at the stage with growing alarm. "I've lived in this town my whole life," I said, pulling a manila envelope from my duffel bag. "Born here, went to school here, started my business here, I met my wife here, raised my daughters here. This community has been everything to me." The crowd was listening now, sensing that something important was happening. But recently, I've learned some things about loyalty, about trust, about the people we think we know. And I thought it was important to share those lessons with all of you, because if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of photographs, printouts of Beth's dating profile, screenshots of her text, messages with John, bank records showing their secret expenditures. 3 months ago, I discovered that my wife of 17 years had been living a double life. She created a dating profile using our engagement photos, with me carefully cropped out, of course. She described herself as recently single and ready to have fun again. A murmur went through the crowd. I could see Beth pushing through the people, her face white with shock and rage. John was doing the same from the other direction, but they were both too far away to stop what was happening. Now I know what you're thinking, I continued. Marriage problems happen. People grow apart. But here's where it gets interesting. The man she was having an affair with wasn't some stranger from the internet. It was my brother John. The murmur became a gasp. In a small town like Millbrook, this was the kind of scandal that would be talked about for decades. That's right, folks. My own brother, my business partner, the man I trusted with my livelihood, decided he wanted to trust with my wife as well. They've been meeting at the Sunset Motel every Tuesday and Friday for the past 4 months, living it up on money from our family business while I worked 60-hour weeks to support a lifestyle that apparently wasn't good enough for them. Beth had almost reached the stage now, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. "Jimmy, stop this right now!" "Oh, but I'm just getting to the good part, honey," I said, smiling down at her. "You see, folks, I might have been willing to chalk this up to midlife crisis and bad judgment. But then I discovered something that changed everything." I pulled out another set of documents, the text messages between Beth and Angela. It turns out this wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy. Beth's best friend, Angela Morrison, some of you might remember her from when she worked at my company before I fired her for stealing. She orchestrated this entire thing as revenge against me. I could see Angela now, trying to slip away through the crowd, but people were watching her, connecting the dots. Angela convinced my wife that she deserved better, encouraged her relationship with my brother, and helped plan their secret meetings. The goal was to destroy my marriage, turn my daughters against me, and ultimately take everything I'd worked for. All because I had the audacity to fire her when I caught her embezzling from Parish Electrical. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This was better than any soap opera. "But here's the thing about conspiracies," I said, pulling out one final document. "They require trust between the conspirators. And trust, as I've learned, is a very fragile thing." I held up a DNA test result. You see, when I found out about the affair, I started wondering about other things, like whether my daughters were really my daughters. So I had a test done. Beth's face went from white to green. John had stopped trying to reach the stage and was backing away through the crowd. "Good news, everyone. Beau and Bree are definitely mine. Which means that no matter what happens with the divorce, no matter how much my wife and brother try to take from me, I'll always have the most important thing, my children." I folded up the documents and put them back in the envelope. I want to thank you all for listening. I know this isn't the kind of entertainment you expected at Founders Day, but I thought it was important that everyone know the truth. After all, this is a small town, and secrets have a way of coming out eventually. I set the microphone back in its stand and walked off the stage, leaving behind a crowd of stunned faces and 3 people whose lives had just been destroyed in the most public way possible. Beth was crying now, surrounded by people who were staring at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. John had disappeared entirely, probably heading for his car and the fastest route out of town. Angela was being confronted by her current husband, who was demanding to know if any of what I'd said was true. I walked through the crowd, accepting handshakes and pats on the back from people who suddenly saw me as the wronged hero of this drama. The boring, predictable Jimmy Parrish had just pulled off the most spectacular public revenge in Millbrook's history. As I reached my truck, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Mick, grinning like a proud father. "That," he said, "was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. You hit all three of them at once, in front of the whole town, with no way for them to recover. I couldn't have planned it better myself." "Think it'll stick?" I asked. "Stick? Jimmy, you just ended their lives in this town. Beth will never be able to show her face at another social event. John's business reputation is destroyed. And Angela? She's finished. Her husband looked ready to kill her, and everyone else looked ready to help." I nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction settle in my chest. Good. So what now? I looked back at the festival, where people were still buzzing about what they'd witnessed, where my wife was being comforted by the few friends she had left, where my brother's absence spoke louder than any words could have. Now, I go home and wait for the fallout, because this is just the beginning. As I drove away from the town square, I could see people in my rearview mirror still talking, still processing what they'd witnessed. By tonight, the story would have spread to every household in Millbrook. By tomorrow, it would be the stuff of legend. Beth, John, and Angela had wanted to destroy me quietly, privately, thinking I was too stupid and trusting to fight back. Instead, they'd created a monster who was smarter, more ruthless, and more patient than they'd ever imagined. And I was just getting started.